So here we are, Season 4, a big one for the show. Unlike the previous seasons, we have a historical to open the season, but one of the more forgettable ones. Although I am curious, despite being a bit of a forgotten serial, it does have a few very interesting things to talk about for one reason or another. We begin where we left off with the war machines. In fact, we open on the closing shot of the TARDIS taking off. Of course, Ben and Polly have somehow managed to sneak aboard the TARDIS, much to the Doctor's surprise.
Well, it was a police box, wasn't it?
What are you both doing in here?
You dropped your key.
How dare you follow me into the TARDIS?
The what?
The TARDIS, sir!
A brief description of what the scanner is and what it's called later.
Now, you see that scanner? That is what I call the scanner up there.
And the TARDIS lands in 16th century Cornwall. So the initial reactions of Ben and Polly are great. Their disbelief with Ben thinking he might be dreaming, so Polly pinches him very hard. Ben is probably the stronger here, getting multiple reactions inside and outside of the TARDIS, while Polly is secondary to him. Polly says she's scared, but that soon fades away when she pinches Ben, not having much else of an immediate reaction. I suppose when introducing two companions it does make it harder to give both a strong reaction, but Polly really doesn't get much of anything, kind of similar to Barbara who just sort of believed it. But I think Polly gets it a bit worse by being outwardly scared. This is kind of worsened by being Polly who works at their location as Cornwall, meaning she had less of a reason to be scared, as she had more familiarity with the environment. But at the very least it does take both of them a bit of time to accept that they're not in 1966 anymore. So getting the plot moving, episode 1 mostly consists of the trio becoming accustomed to their surroundings, taking its time to set things up and get Ben and Polly acclimatised to travelling. Notably, everyone thinking Polly is a boy due to her wearing trousers, something she is not amused by. We also have the introduction of Cherub as the main pirate for this episode, who is trying to find an old fellow sailor of his who has been hiding, this being the churchwarden who the trio met while travelling from the TARDIS to the inn, where they plan to rest. Longfoot was once a member of Captain Avery's crew, alongside Cherub, and is now hiding Avery's treasure. There isn't much to him as he is killed very early on by Cherub, but he gives a clue to the Doctor, which is why he gets caught up in the hunt for the treasure. I'll come back to this clue later where it becomes more relevant. The trio were split up at this point, with the Doctor being captured and taken to Captain Pike's ship, while Ben and Polly are arrested. I'll talk about the Doctor first, as he spends a decent chunk of time on the ship, either talking with Pike or his fellow prisoner, the inn owner, Cooper, who is also the one who turned Ben and Polly in. So the Doctor was captured due to his knowledge about the clue that led to Avery's treasure. His opening confrontation with Pike is quite strong, trying to play to his more reasonable side, calling him a gentleman and making note of his clothing and manner. He's playing for time in his life, which is often where Hartnell shines, showing off his intelligence and trying to manipulate his enemy. Ultimately, this leads to the Doctor being in a situation where he can escape. With the help of Cooper, the two of them are able to trick one of the pirates, Jamaica, allowing them to escape the ship. Meanwhile, Ben and Polly are also prisoners, but of the Squire, who is the meeting point between both of these stories, as the Squire is a part of a smuggling operation which Pike and Cherub plan to steal goods from. But on Ben and Polly, they escape through the use of pretending Polly is a witch so they can freak out Tom, who is both their guard for some reason and the stable boy of the inn. Whereas that the Doctor is a wizard and they are his apprentices. But I always just think it's Polly being a witch, as she is the only one who does any of the pretend witchcraft. Annika Wills does give a very fun performance during this scene, really showing her abilities as she creeps Tom out. Meanwhile, Ben just yelling, insisting that Tom be scared basically. It's just a great little scene. Things don't go well once they've escaped, as they end up trying to speak with the Squire who is in the meeting with Pike and Cherub at the time, this being the meeting in which Pike pretends to want to be in on the smuggling operation. This leads to the introduction of Blake, a government servant who is trying to uncover the smuggling operation, but Ben believes he may be responsible for the death of Longfoot, so ties him up and leaves him in the crypt under the church. I'll also note that Blake found a secret tunnel which leads to the TARDIS landing site on the beach, this being a part of the smuggler's route. So there is a lot going on in the middle of this story, and since I've introduced the main players and the general key plot points, I'm going to move to Avery's treasure and the clue which the Doctor was given. This being a riddle which, depending on which source you believe, either the Doctor gets it wrong but everyone else gets it right, or as it actually is, Longfoot gets it wrong while telling the Doctor in episode 1.
Remember these words. This is Dead Man's Secret Key. Smallwood, Ringwood, Gurney.
While the actual riddle is
Ringwood, Small Bear, Gurney, and Dead Man.
The obvious mistake is Small Beer being called Small Wood, which technically means the Doctor somehow knew the correct version without being told it. I don't think we're giving him enough credit. So the riddle is the name of Avery's crew whose tombs are in the crypt, and in fact there turns out to be a fourth, with Dead Man being one of the names. The treasure being buried under a slab that is placed where the lines from the tombs intersect. But the discovery of the treasure by Pike is short-lived, having already killed Cherub for it. Blake brings in a militia who kills the pirate of the church, with Pike falling while the trio slip out through the secret passage. Now I didn't mention that Blake was freed. This is due to a lot of the smuggling and Squire plotline has just sort of been forgotten by me. Quite a lot of the getting from A to B of this serial is stuff I don't tend to remember, unless it's something notable like the Polly doing witchcraft moment. Admittedly, I think that this is the biggest problem I have with this serial, that I don't remember a lot of it. Now I don't think that it's a single problem which causes this, and not a problem with the serial itself. This is quite a busy serial with multiple plot threads dealing with deception and false allegations and that sort of stuff, so it's full to bursting with plot. Now there's not a problem with a serial like that. There are many great serials which are like this, but it's the serial serial's missing status which causes this to be a problem. Now when there's no visuals to go with the story, it means that it's harder to follow and remember unless it really sticks with you. The Smugglers isn't a boring serial, but it doesn't stick with me as strongly as other missing serials, meaning that the busier episodes 2 and 3 don't stick in my mind for too long. Beyond that, I think this serial just generally suffers from its missing status. There's a lot of location filming which is lost, plus a big battle at the end which just can't be replicated with stills. This sort of problem isn't unique at all to the Smugglers, but it feels quite prominent here. I do feel bad for saying this because it's not a bad or boring serial at all, but I suppose not all of them can be a winner with everyone. It is unfortunate as this was Hartnell's last hurrah in a way, his penultimate serial, and he does give a great performance. Plenty of scenes where he is just showing off what makes him such a strong version of the Doctor. His confrontations with Pike are probably the strongest of these moments. On the behind the scenes, there's a few things to talk about. Let's begin with the location filming. As said before, the serial does feature a lot of location filming, which was done in Cornwall as per the setting. This gave us the show's second female director, Julia Smith, who was chosen to direct due to her familiarity with the Cornish coast. Additionally, this filming required a change to the TARDIS prop, so that it could fit into the cave. This updated version of the TARDIS first appeared in the War Machines. This change is often, or more accurately, almost always credited to the massacre, but didn't in fact happen for quite some time later. I will also note that Hartnell enjoyed his time in Cornwall, and so returned for a holiday during the production break, but this wouldn't end up being the happiest of holidays. But talking about that is something which will have to wait until the next serial. We also have 3 notable things to talk about in terms of actors. Firstly, we have who I believe is the oldest person known to be associated with the show, in the form of Jack Hodges Blight, who played Gaptooth, being born in 1890, making him around 76 during this, but sadly passed away a year later. But on the other side of things, we have Elroy Josephs as Jamaica, the first black actor to have a speaking role in the show. Well, I often hear it as the first, but according to Toby Haydock, he was the first to have a significant speaking role, which is more than likely given the roles which involved chanting or a person in the crowd in previous serials, such as Sam Mansouri, who was in both Mission to the Unknown as a delegate and The War Machines as a journalist. Neither had dialogue, but were likely involved in the general chaos. Either way, this still means that Elroy Joseph was a big step forward for the show, although I am curious if the casting decision was made before or after the name of Jamaica was chosen, given that we know the character's original name was meant to be Crow. And for the final thing on actors, is this was the first serial to feature Terry Walsh. While he wouldn't become a major part of the show until a few years later, this was the introduction of one of the most notable stuntmen in the show. In this story he was one of the many militiamen, but will go on to be one of the backbones of stunts in the 70s. So I've had nowhere near as much to say about The Smugglers as with other serials. It's not a bad story by any means, but it's one of those that perhaps just isn't for me. Maybe if it still existed I'd have a higher opinion of it. I can understand why it's one that people do love, but at the same time why it's not the most well known. But after escaping, the TARDIS has landed in the coldest place in the world. Next time, the 10th planet.